Couple more minutes, everyone. People are still coming in. Let's give them a couple of minutes.
Can I say something to you while we're waiting?
Yeah, but everyone's going to hear you.
That's okay. Don't worry. I like your hair. I like, you're looking good. And I just want to say you look like you're a DJ in Vegas, like in your DJ booth with what do you miss? What do you miss, Laura?
Oh my God. I miss being out and dancing, out with friends dancing. Yeah.
And David, are you around?
I'm here, man.
What do you miss?
Well, I miss glamorous people because I'm that kind of guy. So like what I was saying is like, when I was living in New York, I like to go for Friday night. I go to a burger at Balthazar at midnight. And Balthazar's packed, right? It was awesome. Yeah.
That's a great, you know what? There's so few restaurants in the world that can do 3 meals a day really, really well. And Balthazar in New York is one of those that can do breakfast, lunch, dinner. I miss a great restaurant. That's what I'm missing right now. I'm jonesing for having a nice bottle of wine and a spectacular conversation, an amazing server, and the best food, and just enjoying the conviviality of it all. So who's there? Maybe Nikki would. So put in your chat, and we're gonna get Laura started now. Put in your chat, what are you missing? What are you missing out there? Like in the world that we are living in today, what are you missing? And if you're not missing anything, tell us that too. Don't tell us. I put it in I'm sorry.
Just put them in the chat.
Put it in the chat. And Cynthia, thank you. But yep. Lots of people putting their stuff in the chat. The physical touch, art museums, global travel, human connection, hair and nail salons, sex with my husband. Wait, you met obviously in different places. Okay, take it away, Laura. Let's go.
Oh my gosh. So welcome everyone to our 4th episode of Happy Hour show with Chip and David. We have a special guest tonight. The guys will introduce. And apologies, we moved our day from Wednesday to Thursdays. So from this time forward, we'll continue on Thursday evenings. So you guys take it away. David, you there?
Yes. Chip, we should welcome everyone, eh?
Let's welcome, let's say it's a happy hour, and you don't have to be drinking alcohol, but you should have something. I have my Baja Brewing Scorpion dark beer here. Why don't everybody, for those of you who want to put everybody on gallery view, you can see everybody giving a quick cheers and a little toast to each other. And
cheers.
Now time for happy hour. Well, David, how are you?
I'm good. Should we introduce ourselves? So I'm David Stewart, founder of AGEIST. And who are you, Chip?
I'm Chip Conley, the founder of the Modern Elder Academy. And before we talk a little bit more about ourselves, let me just say, last week we were so lucky, or 2 weeks ago, we were so lucky to have Barbara Waxman here, quite famous gerontologist who is popularizing the word midolescence, the version of adolescence. And she says thank you to all of you who sent donations to her favorite charity, which is extrafood.org in Marin County. And she also wanted to remind everybody that I think Anne Marie's going to put this in the chat. You're offered to get a free quiz. It's called the 5 Essential Elements Quiz. And it's a really successful personal and professional life quiz. It helps people to understand like what's the right path for them. So we'll put that in the chat box, Laura or Anne Marie will. And yeah, just thanks to Barbara. And I'm excited about Paul tonight. But David, how are you doing?
I'm great, man. I'm having a good day. You know, Thursday is so much better because we publish on Wednesday. I'm like a zombie by the time I get here. So
well, you publish on Wednesday, but we see it on Thursday. And what I saw today is that you are officially 54 years old biologically. Years old chronologically.
That's right.
What's that about?
So there's a way you can date your biological age. It's called a methylation test. The one I took is made by Elysium Health called Index. So by me being 50, my actual age, my chronological age is 61. my biological age as tested through the methylation test is 54, which means I have an aging coefficient of 0.89, which means I'm a little, which means I'm doing great, right?
Does that mean you're an underachiever?
Oh, stop it, you. We're not ready for you yet.
So wait, that means that you're aging at 0.89 instead of like 1.0 would be you're aging at
Yeah.
61. So
Yeah.
you're aging. Why do you think that is? What do you think what's the secret to your success in terms of aging more slowly?
Well, I think if you so you look at the counter indicators, right? So like if I smoked, if I drank
alcohol,
well, like a lot, right? So, you know, if I'm doing like a bottle of tequila a day, that number would probably be quite different.
Yeah.
If I was overweight, but you know, I exercise pretty rigorously. I've been really careful about what I eat for like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I take an NAD enhancer. I take Basis. You know, I do some other stuff.
What is Basis?
Basis it's an NAD booster. So
what is anti-D?
No, NAD, like
NAD.
Yeah. So it's a way of boosting your cellular
health. That's like
health.
a non-disclosure agreement. I'm sorry.
Well, that's sort of like at the other end.
Wait a minute. Okay, so you're 54.
Yeah.
So but you're 61, and so I took one of those online little 10-minute parlor quizzes. Not quite what you did, and it said I was going to live till age 98, and I did this about a couple of years ago. I actually did it when I was 57. I'm 59 and a half.
Okay.
And so it said I was going to live till 98. It was such an interesting revelation. When I was 57, I found out I was going to live till 98. And I did the math and I said, my gosh, if I start counting at age 18, I am not even halfway through my adult life yet at age 57, because 39 years behind me, 18 to 57, 41 years ahead of me, 57 to 98. How many of us are taught that kind of new math? And what if the world woke up and said, there's a new math out there that is all about realizing what percentage of your adult life is still ahead of you. And maybe if you learned that, not only would you take better care of yourself, but you'd actually be more curious about trying new things.
Well, and I think that's very interesting. And I think that, we're going to talk to Paul about some of the things he's involved with. And so that 98, you may have the capacity to push that considerably.
Who knows what the right number is? Let's meet Paul.
Anyway, so Paul Hynek is one of the most. I get to meet a lot of interesting people in my world. Paul is up there as one of the most fascinating people I've ever met. He has a long list of notable achievements. One of which is he's one of 9 people in the world who recently successfully completed the Stanford TRIM trial, with the result of returning his thymus gland back to the size of a 30-year-old. And most shockingly, he was able to turn back his epigenetic clock by a couple of years. So in other words, he's younger now than he was a couple of years ago, which is kind of amazing. Paul comes from a renowned science family. His father was the quite well-known Dr. Alan Hynek, who was the scientific consultant to the U.S. Air Force for UFOs for about 20 years. So Paul knows a lot about that, UFOs and aliens. Paul is also a consultant on Project Blue Book, the TV show on which his father's experience was based. And he, as I said, is one of the world's foremost authorities on UFOs and aliens. And I would probably put him as the world's #1 authority on that. And Paul is part of a radical longevity tribe that includes Aubrey de Grey, Steve Horvath, Ray Kurzweil. And most remarkably for Paul, in his parallel life, he's this really straight-laced finance guy. He's got a Wharton MBA. He's an adjunct professor of finance and accounting at Pepperdine, and the creator of startup financial productions or financial projections for startups that have raised over $1 billion. Complicated fellow. We like Paul.
Welcome, Paul. Paul, God.
Cheers.
Cheers, exactly. Cheers to you.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us more.
Okay, thank you. I'm happy to be here and see all these lovely Zoom grid faces with such diverse backgrounds. I guess I have 2 lives, CFO and UFOs, and I sort of straddle the difference between them. I don't have a job. I have projects that I work on in different phases, and I just chase after shiny balls that are either interesting to me, the people are cool, or there's something I'm going to learn and kind of stretch to have to do successfully.
So did you know when you were a kid, you grew up with a famous father, famous for really studying UFOs, and then you went to Wharton for business school, and you teach accounting and business. At what point did you sort of deviate from the father tribe in the sense of like deciding that you were going to go into a more traditional background as opposed to saying, you know what, I'm going to go out and become a space scientist or something like that? I mean,
Well,
it sounds like you're able to, you have it all pretty well packaged, that they're two sides of the same coin, but I'd love to understand that a little bit more. Like, at what point did you decide to go the more traditional path?
well, you're a fine one to talk about two sides of the coin, being a boutique hotel operator who then goes on to advise the largest hotel company in the world.
Well,
From what
the
I know.
largest hospitality company. So
Largest
that's
hospitality company. All right.
Airbnb. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, I've never really made conscious decisions about plans for my life. I decided to be an MBA because MBAs are basically producers of things all around the world. If you want to get something done, an MBA is a great person to helm the project. And I saw my father struggling with a nonprofit to study UFOs. And I decided that to find real significance in my life, I'd have to first get to some modicum of financial success. And an MBA seemed like a good route to do that. And I also went to Wharton because University of Pennsylvania is a fine school, and I got a master's in international studies as well. And I'm an old language hound, so that made it even more palatable for me.
So, I mean, David, I'll pass it back to you, but I want to know more about your dad. That's for sure.
So, I guess I wanted to understand this, your quest for longevity. So, so you had, who was it? Greg? It was Greg Fahey, right? Who ran that test. So he monitored you and shot you up with a bunch of stuff that caused you to be younger. In the butt, right?
No, in the stomach. Come on.
Oh, in the stomach. Okay,
This is
sorry.
happy hour. This is not after hours.
Okay, that's another show. So, like, why did you do that? And like, how does it work? And like, how old are you? Like, I came in at 54. How old did they test you?
Yeah, so I can make the claim, tongue firmly in cheek, that in the history of the world, I have the most documented success at reversing my age.
Wow.
And I say that because of Greg Fahey, the genius behind this project, which, as you said, was run under the aegis of the Stanford Neuroscience Institute, was to tackle the first and hardest problem in longevity. When we get older, as soon as you turn 20, your thymus involutes or shrinks to the tune of 3% per year. That's considered normal, healthy aging. I view aging as a disease, but that's accepted by the mainstream. And the problem with that is your thymus, which is located behind your breastplate here, is what creates T cells. T cell stands for thymus-enabled cells. They are your white blood cells. They're what fights off diseases. And as you get older, your thymus is getting smaller and smaller. And by the time you get in your 50s, it's really no longer producing a lot of naive T cells, which are effective at fighting novel pathogens that your body hasn't seen. So of all the things we need to do to live a radically longer time, be it telomeres, DNA, what have you, if you don't have a robust immune system, it's all for naught. So I was speaking at a conference with Aubrey de Grey, and Greg Fahey, an unassuming yet brilliant medical scientist, was giving a presentation on this trial he was running, and he was seeking volunteers. And so I'm in like a life extension singularity crowd. I'm thinking there's going to be a bum rush to the stage. So I'm looking at like likely competitors to get to the stage before me. I'm going to trip this guy. I'm going to elbow this guy here, because I thought it was going to be a madhouse. And afterwards, there wasn't this rush to the stage. I went to the stage and I said to Greg, whatever test you have to run on me, that's fine. but I guarantee I will be in this trial. And so luckily I got in, I did the trial. We kicked it off at the Stanford Neuroscience Institute. I felt it was such a big adventure that I dubbed us the Thymonauts. And for a year, we injected human growth hormone in our bellies, David. And the results were so impressive that we submitted them to Steve Horvath of UCLA of the Horvath clock, which is the sort of gold standard for epigenetic or methylation aging. And hundreds of companies and people and drugs and trials and protocols have been submitted to him. None have moved the needle on the Horvath clock until this thymus test. And it moved it by a matter of years. And so Steve got so excited, he joined the company. And we published those results in Aging Cell last September, which is the first study approved by the FDA for life extension as opposed to merely fighting this or that disease. So now Steve is part of the company, and following my interest of looking after cool scientific balls and monetizing them, I'm now the CFO of the company as well.
Oh, wow. So you did get the CFO in there. I love it. Wait, so
Yeah.
so let's do some math. How old are you in chronological human years?
I just turned 58.
Okay. And
our
ahead.
trial showed on really hardcore epigenetic testing that the average age reversal was 2.5 years. For whatever reason, my brother and Joel and I had the best results in the trial. So that's my basis for claiming the best documented success in age reversal in history.
And how long do you think you're going to live? I mean, what's do you and how do you even have a sense of that?
Yeah, well, I want to live forever. I don't want to die. There's a whole lot of problems with that. You can get hit by a bus. We're living in an age of a pandemic. Hopefully my thymus is robust enough to fight that off. I mean, I could probably walk into a room and lick COVID molecules off a desk and convert them into proteins.
Don't try that at home.
Yeah, don't try that at home. But you know, there's all kinds of risks. So just because my thymus has been turned back, and you may be able to see the bulge in my breastplate here, doesn't mean, that means my immune system will go on and be really strong. I'm strong like bull from an immune system point of view. But there's a whole lot of other issues that can do you in besides accidents. So now I'm looking at trying to figure out the other keys, and with other people's research, trying to figure out the other things to do in that kind of a cocktail to achieve what Ray Kurzweil calls lifetime escape velocity, where you're chronologically aging, but biologically getting younger every day.
But Steve Jobs and a bunch of people have said death is a beautiful organizing principle for life. No?
Yeah, I think it's a bunch of bullshit. I mean, I don't think you need death. I understand that the ephemeral notion of life can add value to it. Personally, I find meaning and value in life without death as this some kind of sword of Damocles hanging over us. That's just me.
Yeah, I understand.
So I want to live forever, but you know, to live forever, you need more than one substrate that won't give out on you. Even if you use Aubrey's sort of repair it like a car all the time, you need to be able to upload whatever the you-ness is in you, and then be able to download it to other substrates. And that's, you know, even a harder problem.
But you're going to have skin that's going to look different, right? I mean, your skin, how could just when I got comfortable in my own skin, it started to sag.
Boom, boom. Yeah, you know, I mean, there's a lot of problems here, and the thymus is just one solution to a bevy of very difficult issues. But like I said, if we get to the point where we can upload whatever you call you, personality, the soul, all that stuff, then you can achieve functional immortality.
Interesting.
But, you know, when I was a kid, you know, watching Star Trek, they had these guys, aliens' heads in jars living forever. And I thought, well, that's a form of immortality, but not especially pleasant. And I'm also not interested in discontinuous immortality, like being frozen or vitrified at Alcor and then bringing you back. I don't see why people would want to bring me back 500 years from now. So I'm interested in plan A and just not shuffling off this mortal coil and sticking around as long as I can and trying to help move the needle on the overall industry.
Wow. David.
Okay. So I got to ask you the question everybody wants to know, right? The whole UFO alien thing. What's the deal? Real, not real? And have you had any personal contact with aliens?
I will answer the second question, yes, with an asterisk. And I will address that first really easy question by saying the U in UFO, as my father used to say, simply means unidentified. And I think by most rational, open-minded observer of the phenomena's point of view, there have been enough interesting cases that are corroborated by credible witnesses, caught on film, on radar, etc., to indicate that something's happening. That does not necessarily mean that these are aliens from other planets. There are a whole lot of problems with that hypothesis. I certainly do believe there is some meat to the UFO phenomena. And just recently, we've got the Navy and then the Pentagon saying, yes, we see hundreds of what they call unidentified aerial phenomena objects. We don't know what to do about them. We're afraid of the danger they pose to our pilots. We need help reporting them. And if you read the New York Times or see online, you see this amazing footage of these crafts caught on radar, watched visually through binoculars, and caught on fighter jet gun cameras at the same time, doing things that our own earthly technology cannot do, and they've been verified by both the Navy and the Pentagon. That's about as smoking a gun as you can get, I feel.
Now, but let's go to the second part of the question. Have you spoken?
Can you repeat that?
Have you communicated with any of the folks that are in the UFOs?
So here's what I'll say to that. My father and Jacques Vallée and others began to feel that the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is sort of the knee-jerk theory that people have if they think about UFOs, fell short. My father called them Ufo Experiences because there are aspects of what people report that go beyond just a visual sighting. If a ship is to come from another planet, they better have a really good reason. They have to travel vast distances, tweak Einstein in the nose. We have very sensitive instruments to detect objects entering and leaving our atmosphere. And these ships exhibit, per the reports, a lot of comfort with our Earth gravity and atmosphere. So it kind of puts some chinks in the armor of the old standby extraterrestrial theory. So my father started thinking about things like time travel or interdimensional origins. So I ran with that, and there's a longer explanation, but the short explanation is to try to go to another dimension, I started taking DMT. DMT is sort of the big brother of ayahuasca. It's the most powerful psychedelic drug known on Earth. And what's interesting about it, there's a growing body of reports, Rick Strassman and others, and of course Terence McKenna, that show a commonality of reports of people who take this potent psychedelic, who feel that they've gone to a hyper-real realm where what Terence McKenna called machine elves, and they feel like they view the fabric of the universe being created. I know this is pretty trippy, but this is happy hour.
Yeah,
Cheers.
it sounds a little Matrix-like on some level.
Yeah, and my brother, Joel, who's coming over any minute now to bring me my cone for my cat, did the visual effects for the Matrix.
Oh, is that right?
So anyways, I thought, well, in the interest of science, mind you, only in the interest of science, it's my obligation to take DMT for myself, go to that realm, and see what I can see and try to report and see if that is the origin of aliens. So I did. And it's friggin' fantastic. And I had a communication with this kind of mostly female Gaia-like presence that wasn't sort of incorporated in elves or scorpions or anything like that. It was just all around as I felt the universe being created. And once I got my sea legs about me, I said, excuse me, because I think that's polite to, interdimensional species. Are you the intelligence that we perceive to be behind UFOs and aliens. And I kind of feel like these, 1,000-mile synapses being fired, and an answer came bubbling down to me that said, well, in sort of a benevolent way, we can't answer that in a way that you would understand. Oh, wow. And I said, well, I understand no. So it sounds like there's some amount of yes in what you're saying. And then before I knew it, I'm back in my body and trying to reassemble the stranded pieces of my ego.
Wait a minute. So have you had this conversation with the dean of the Pepperdine Business School where you're teaching?
Yes, actually.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
Yeah. And I in my class at Pepperdine, I tell them all about DMT. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I thought that was like a really conservative religious institution, but
Well, right. I'm a snarky atheist who doesn't really like accounting, who's teaching accounting and finance at a Christian school. So the kids come for accounting and finance, and they stay for UFOs and DMT.
So wait, your father actually, I think he coined the term close encounters, and
Yes.
he actually spoke in front of the UN General Assembly in 1978 about
That's
UFOs.
right.
So he was a big deal. And, the whole premise of Close Encounters came from him. So what have we made much progress since 1978 when he was actually in the UN General Assembly talking about UFOs?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, the recent Pentagon disclosures, to me, constitute real progress. It really depends on what you mean by progress, but it's a murky phenomena that may have a lot of explanations, including the vast majority of cases are misidentifications of Venus, at which billions of rounds of ammunition have been fired in wars, hoaxes, psychedelics, whatever it is. Most of the things are nothing, but there's always this stubborn core of 5%. There is a growing body of cases, and I'm now chairman of the advisory council for MUFON, which is the largest UFO research organization in the world, and we're codifying all this data. So we have a much larger database of cases that we can examine
yesterday,
than we did in 1978.
I'm eating chickpeas now, and yesterday I ate this too. Chickpeas every day.
Ivy, hold on.
Yeah, and the term Close Encounters, so the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind was based on my dad's work. Spielberg read his book, bought the rights to the title, and a lot of things that happen in the movie are things that were based in UFO literature, and my father has a cameo role in the movie as well. And I met Spielberg when I was a kid during filming.
Oh, I think Chip got muted.
Were you ever scared of UFOs?
No, and if one landed here right now, I would Johnny on up that ramp and take a ride. Of course, I say that fortified by Guinness here, but it's true.
Yeah, we're both doing a dark beer. I appreciate that. I have another question. I want to shift, David, unless you want to stay on this, I have another, I want to shift.
No.
So I've heard through the grapevine that you are a big fan of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is my favorite book.
Yeah.
And you give the book away to friends, especially when they're going through a tough time. Talk about that book. Why do you love that book so much, and why do you give it away? And is there some relationship between that book and being a CFO and a UFO expert?
If I can find a pithy, connective narrative, I'll spit it out. But first, the reason that book is important is, for those who don't know, there were 3 schools of psychology between the world wars in Vienna. Sigmund Freud, the best known, was the search for pleasure. Philip Adler was the search for power. And then you had Viktor Frankl, which was the search for meaning. Viktor Frankl was an amazing guy in my mind. And in World War II, he and his whole family, including his pregnant wife and his parents, were tossed into Auschwitz. Viktor Frankl was the sole survivor and wrote the seminal book, Man's Search for Meaning, right after being released, luckily, fortunately, when the Allies liberated the camps. I found out about the book when I was going through a period of acute depression in my life, and I was looking for answers and anything I could flail around and grab in my misery. And I found that book, and it really sort of painted a roadmap for me. One of the problems I had was I didn't feel that I could ever find what I had previously viewed as constituting happiness. It seemed like an impossible goal. And so therefore, if I can never be happy, why go on? If I've already sort of peaked, let's just call it a day and get out of the way, let other people go about their business. And what Frankl talks about is that, sure, happiness is great and there's no begrudging of happiness, but that the most important thing in life is having a sense of meaning. However you construe that, through religious avenues or not, through family, fulfillment in your career, all mixed together, that it's really about meaning in your life. And you can have an example of one person who was born with a silver spoon, has everything they need, but they feel bored, and when they, at the pearly gates or wherever, may not feel like their life really had a lot of meaning. On the other side of town is a working mother with a bad back who works 2 manual jobs. Her kids are the first people in her family to go to college. That life is tough, a lot of pain, but she may feel that it was more fulfilling and meaningful. So even with suffering, which is not necessary to have a meaning, if you have meaning, life is worthwhile. And when that clicked in me, because I thought, I can't be happy, but I don't need happiness if I have meaning. That's the most important thing. And if I can channel my efforts to find meaning, like as not, happiness will follow along at some point. So that's why I started teaching at Pepperdine. It seemed like a big challenge. And if I could introduce financial literacy in young people's lives, it could have an effect, an impact on them. That would give me meaning. And also to carry on sort of the academic torch from my full bird professor father, whereas I'm an accidental adjunct. So what I do now is I search for meaning in things with people that I know, like David, and other projects I do. There has to be some kernel of meaning in it for me to get interested and to really get my juices flowing.
So would you say despair equals suffering minus meaning? So despair and meaning are sort of inversely proportional.
Yeah, and I'd say it's probably not the only conditions that cause despair, but that's certainly a good one. And one of the examples that Frankl gives, I think, is the most beautiful example of love I've ever heard. There was like an 85-year-old man who came into his office who had been married for 65 years. His beloved wife had died. They had a family, kids, grandkids, and all that. And he says, look, why should I live? What's the point? And Frankl tells him something in 1 minute that makes him want to live. It's just incredible to me. And Frankl asked him, I'm sorry about your pain. Did your wife love you? And he said, yes. The greatest accomplishment in my life was marrying my high school sweetheart. And we really did love each other our whole lives. We were the fairy tale. And that's why I can't live anymore. Everywhere I look, every single thing in my life is infused with her. And it's too painful. And so Frankl said, again, I'm sorry. I see the pain you're going through. But the fact that you are experiencing this pain right now means that you spared your wife this pain. You took this upon yourself. And to me, that's like the most selfless way to look at love. And so the man left the office with a spring in his arthritis-ridden knees, and it didn't take away the pain. It's not about magic. It's about meaning. And now he had meaning, and he wanted to show his family that meaning. So even through suffering, and that's almost unimaginable suffering, to lose someone who is your lodestone for your whole life, he still wanted to live after 1 minute. And that's the beauty of Frankl and his logotherapy and the focus on meaning in life. And for the folks of you who haven't read it, it's a very thin book. And even though it talks a lot about his time in Auschwitz and other labor camps, it's not a downer. It's immediately uplifting.
Beautiful.
And yes, I give it away to people who are depressed. I encourage my class at Pepperdine to read it. It's not only accounting, DMT, and UFOs. There's other things too.
David, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, Frankl is one of the great influences on AGEIST has been Frankl. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So tell me, talk to me about languages. Like, what is it? You learn a language in like 2 or 3 months? How do you do that?
Oh.
What's up with that? Is that more hallucinogenic? Are there hallucinogens involved in that? Tell me.
Well, I'm microdosing psilocybin right now, so there are hallucinogens involved in every aspect of my life.
There's a first for
but-
happy hour.
Yeah, right. Cool.
This is a very
Super
happy hour. Super happy hour. Ultra
Yeah, right?
happy hour.
Trippy hour. So I'm a language guy, and I'm fluent in French, really good with the Romance languages, very capable in Japanese, okay in Chinese, know a little bit of Russian, a little bit of English. And I've spoken in native languages in France, Japan, China. I did an hour-long keynote in Argentina in November in Spanish. And I don't speak Spanish, certainly not fluently, and now I'm going to speak for an hour in Italy, in Rome, COVID, God's willing. What I've realized is you don't need to be fluent to give a rip-roaring animated speech in another language. You just have to have a super good translation aided by native speakers, laced with local idiom and colloquialisms, and read it in a really fun, impactful, animated fashion. So now I will speak anywhere in the world in any language with 2-month notice.
And you'll go give the speech in that language.
Yeah, in that language, in whatever language it is. In 2 months, I can learn enough to make people think I'm almost fluent. And then at the end, when they give me the questions, I look there with my patented dumb stare.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm glad to hear your humility on that, because I hear you. I mean, it's the hard part is when you have to interact in that. In my late 50s,
Yeah.
I'm learning Spanish, and it's very humbling. But
Yeah.
there's a beautiful TED talk by a polyglot a woman who's learned 8 languages, and the number one thing she said in her TED talk was the best thing to know about learning a language or anything when the odds are difficult is just have fun.
Yeah.
Have
And
a good time with it.
I would add to that, Chip, and say the number one key to learning a language is to get over the embarrassment of looking like a complete idiot. Because you look like a stupid kindergartner. And people get embarrassed. Oh, am I using the pluperfect? Am I abusing the subjunctive? Is this the right level of formality for this occasion? Just belt it out and don't worry. The more mistakes you make, the more you learn. So you just have to get over that fear of looking like a moron.
I think that's probably a bumper sticker we could all use in life. I'm learning that one in surfing right now too. I look like a moron, but I try not to worry about it, because the truth is all of us at one point were crawling, and we actually learned how to walk, and we weren't self-conscious to actually look around and say, I'm not gonna stand up right now because I might fall. So it is interesting as adults, we are so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
David, should we go open it up? What do you think?
Yeah, I think we have a number of questions, and I'm very excited to hear what they are, and I want to hear what Paul has to say.
All right. Well, Paul, first of all, you're probably not looking at the chats, but everyone loves you, finds you super interesting. They want you to come back.
I'm
Funny.
free that day.
Yeah. So we did ask people to send in their questions, and we received a couple of them. So in the meanwhile, you're welcome to put questions in the chat, and Anne-Marie is going to help me field those. But in the meanwhile, we did get two questions from Joshua Abramson. So Paul, close encounters of the fifth kind occurs as very credible, especially since Stephen Greer has briefed 4 presidents on extraterrestrial contact. How does that stand up for you? And what are your thoughts about Stephen Greer?
Okay, first, Angie, sim, falo português. Stephen Greer, so he's a friend of mine. Very interesting guy who's put out books and movies, and who has really spearheaded the sort of aggregation and concentration of government resources to prompt more of what we call in the UFO field disclosure. My father came up with close encounters, first, second, third kind. Fourth kind means abduction. First kind means you see something. Second kind means physical evidence. Third kind means you see an entity. Now, fourth kind means abduction. And Stephen Greer and close encounter of the fifth kind means that you're actually able to summon them and have a communication. I have not had any close encounters of any kind. so I can't speak to that so much. But Stephen Greer is a fascinating guy who's, I think, pushing, bringing a lot of interesting attention to the field and concentrating interest in a very constructive manner.
We had a question, and it's funny, I was thinking when you were talking about the thymus gland, are there things we can be doing just naturally to keep it more youthful or slow down the aging of the thymus?
Well, so David mentioned NAD, which is a really good regime to be on. Really what a lot of this research comes back, well, I also do intermittent fasting, which has a lot of research. And what I do is I just don't eat after 8 p.m. and I don't eat before noon. Really, really easy stuff. And that has got some pretty good research. So I do that. The two things that keep coming back though are good nutrition and sleep. And I know those sound kind of boring and pedestrian, but there's increasing research or even more compelling about just how important sleep is. So if you sleep, get some exercise, and eat well, and really the key, I think most of us here have probably gotten over that hump and gotten rid of junk food. The key to doing that is to find foods you like better than crappy food so that you don't feel it's a sacrifice that you're giving up the Big Macs. But yeah, to me, you can either do the radical things to get that lifetime escape velocity, or just do what are now, I wouldn't worry about diets and fads because they change all the time, but just eat really good food and sleep, and then start looking in the literature for somewhat more things. I mean, if people are interested in the thymus routine, they can join our next protocol. They come to www.interveneimmune.com. We have a new cohort forming right now, and people can come in and do the same thing that I did and others did for the first TRIM trial at Stanford.
Quick question before we go to the next question from the audience. Why do you think it is that it's primarily, almost like 98% of the people who I know who are interested in radical longevity are men, not women?
Maybe because we live a shorter period of time than women. But the sweet spot that we found when I was working with Aubrey de Grey is white male software engineers. Those are the people that you don't have to convince that you can live a long time. They're the ones that just want to know how. And I think that's because software people are hackers. They hack everything. And they look at lifespan as the running of code. And that can be changed. And so why not change this? And so you come at the field not laden by all the limitations that people in gerontology and genetic engineering have. You come with the goal in mind. And a lot of times, even in business with financial projections, if you forecast, you kind of get shackled by the logic of the formulas in your cells in Excel. But if you do what I call backcast in a qualitative fashion and say, here's where I want to be in 5 years, this is what would constitute success. Amount of money, number of people's lives you touch, whatever the metric is, what are the qualitative milestones you need to get to before that? And then forecast to that, then your forecasting will be more in alignment. So this notion of backcasting is what software people bring to the table in radical life extension, of focusing on the goal and not the difficulty of the next baby step in the field.
Interesting. Good answer. Thank you.
People are asking about the name of the study. I'll put that in the chat box.
Right. So it was as David mentioned, it was the TRIM trial. I forget what it stands for, but the company is interveneimmune.com, and you can go on there and learn about the study and sign up if you like. It's like the hair club for men. I'm not only a trial participant, I'm an executive. And I can't speak high enough about the company and Greg Fay. He was also the leading cryobiologist in the world. So if you do want to preserve your body after death, it uses his technology not to freeze your cells, which causes damage, but to vitrify, more like turning them into glass. And if someone's heart is going to be sent around the world for a transplant, it also uses his technology to preserve it before it's transplanted.
Oh, I have dated people who have hearts of glass, I promise you.
Wow.
Okay, let's keep going, Laura.
All right. So we have a question from Jack Fan. what out of this world's technologies can we expect to see in the near future that other alien civilizations may already be using?
Okay, wow, what an awesome question. So my brother Joel Hynek and our good friend Hoyt Yateman and we are working on reverse engineering the propulsion systems of UFOs and creating an anti-gravity machine. We're following the research of famed French astrophysicist Claude Poher, and we've had some interesting results so far. And we think there's some meat to these bones. So for me, one of the black swan events that we might see in our technological spectrum as we go along is anti-gravity. And I think that would upend things. I mean, it's just, if you let your mind run with it, what would be the repercussions? Like Isaac Asimov, I gotta tell you a story. So when I was a 11-year-old kid, my family spent 2 weeks together with Neil Armstrong and his family in 1973 on an eclipse cruise. And as an 11-year-old son of an astronomer, 4 years after the moon launch, to be with Neil Armstrong and his family for 2 weeks, it was incredible. And we saw the solar eclipse. And I met Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov was asked by these two 20-year-old women for his autograph. He writes on their thighs, Isaac Asimov was here.
Oh, that's,
I thought that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. The reason I mention Isaac Asimov is because in his work, he's not so concerned with X or Y development. He gets into the ramifications of what impact that would have on society, which I find even more interesting. So if you think about it, during happy hour now, what would happen if somebody in Poughkeepsie says, hey, I have an anti-gravity machine? To me, that's fascinating. So I'm the junior lab assistant in this trio of my brother and Hoyt Yateman, but it's a fascinating thing to work on, and we are working on it. And so hopefully I can raise my hand at some point and say, hey, we have an anti-gravity machine.
Fascinating. So a couple of questions from Charlotte Japp. Does Paul think we live in a simulation, and or given his work with the extraterrestrial topics, does he believe in the afterlife?
Okay, wow, those are two pretty big questions. Do we live in a simulation? I'm friends with Stephen Wolfram, who's like the one guy. So for those of you who don't know, Stephen Wolfram is incandescently brilliant. He got a PhD in theoretical physics from Caltech at the age of 20. He is the youngest person ever to win the MacArthur Genius Grant, largely from a recommendation by Richard Feynman at the age of 21. He's created all sorts of things. If you saw the movie Contact, he created the alien language along with his son in the movie Contact. And he's very much into cellular automata and all sorts of other things. And people think that he's the guy that could come up with a simple local rule set to program a universe. Now, I think it's entirely likely. I'm a French major, so I punch above my weight pretty quickly here in these matters, but I think it's entirely likely that we live in a simulation. And, circling back to DMT, as I often do, there's a book called Alien Information Theory that touches upon cellular automata and makes a really good case by a professor from Japan, who's, I think, Australian originally, that what we perceive in DMT is actually a reordering of the thalamocortex or thalamocortical compounds in the brain such that different input is allowed to come in. So if we could well be a simulation, and it's really hard to know, it's kind of like the Truman Show. You got to get up and sort of knock on the top. And the other question was about UFOs, but I forgot.
No, it was about afterlife. Afterlife.
Afterlife. I asked my father to make sure and contact me. And here's a portrait of him on the wall back here. I haven't felt that I received that contact, and I'll tell you, as I mentioned, I'm a snarky atheist, so afterlife gets a little bit tricky. Do I want there to be an afterlife? Yes. Am I trying to avoid learning that as long as possible? Yes. I certainly hope there's an afterlife, but I'm also very careful to believe things that benefit me. which I think we all fall prey to. So I certainly hope there's an afterlife, but I really don't have any. I mean, I've seen ghosts and things like that, but to me, they don't add up to trip the wire to make me feel, yes, there's an afterlife. Not yet.
Remains to be seen. So
Okay,
what
yeah, the DMT UFO boy doesn't believe in everything.
Are you aware of any research on UFO experiences not aging as quickly as others, or research on whether or not the brains of experiences produce higher levels of DMT naturally than others? Ooh.
So I'm not aware of any. So DMT is called the spirit molecule in part because it's natural. It's in plant. It's coursing throughout the natural kingdom, and it's secreted by our pineal gland. So it's in us already. It's not like an alien molecule. I'm not aware of any instruments. There may well be that monitor the level of DMT in the body. In terms of like the Peter Paul principle of someone going on a UFO and coming back and not having aged, there have been anecdotal reports of that, but that's a really hard thing to put in anything resembling a sociological petri dish. So there are reports in the literature, and yes, we ufologists call it literature, but it's really hard to sort of get a real concrete feel on. It's one of those sort of more tantalizing aspects of an already elusive phenomenon.
And last question. A question came over. Your biological age is 58 right now. How old are you, after all of this testing, how old are you now?
13.
Really?
Yeah,
That
I don't know.
explains everything.
It's a little bit fuzzy, but yeah,
Dude,
this is
you're
a
hitting puberty.
hardcore. Yeah. My voice is about to squeak. So, I don't really know, and I want to keep doing it. I'm not done with this thymus stuff. I'm going to keep doing it.
Amazing. All right. Lots of questions. People want you to come back. There were so many questions about wanting to understand more about UFOs and extraterrestrial. Any last comments you'd like to share with us?
Well, Munish Aznani says that there's a ghost in his house that occasionally farts. I find that pretty interesting. Yeah, maybe that's how I'll leave it. I don't know.
Okay. Oh gosh.
Chip, what, I mean.
What do you say to that?
So no, the question I want to ask.
Nothing. I got
wait,
nothing.
I have a question. So Paul, are you in a relationship, like a romantic relationship? Are you married, etc.? And I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to understand who is in your world. Your brother's in your world, and your cat's in your world, but your world is wow, big and complex. And are you married to an alien?
Tell.
What's that?
A girl doesn't kiss and tell.
Okay. No, honestly, what I think, if I were to summarize what we've heard in the last 50 minutes or so, 45 to 50 minutes, it's just like, oh my God, that's a devouring brain. That's a brain that has an appetite, has a growth mindset, has a point of view that my life is not about proving myself, it's to improve myself in all kinds of ways. And yet that's why I asked about your partner if you're dating someone, because like it seems like a full-time job to be as fucking smart as you are. Truly. I mean that.
Are you available, Chip?
I'm not available, but thank you for asking, Paul.
Somebody's laughing in the background.
I love that. So this has been a, we've had great guests, and all I'm going to say, David, is thank you for introducing us to Paul. And I am going to introduce us to our next guest, if that's okay, David. Are you okay with that?
Please. Really, the only thing I have to add here is what I like about Paul is Paul embraces possibility. And if there's anything that I think the commonality of what we're about, it's embracing possibility and going towards it.
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful book called The Art of Possibility by the former conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra. possibility is a fascinating subject. So speaking of that, our next guest is a friend of mine, and I'm not actually going to tell you her name, but I'm going to actually give you 3 facts about her and then let you do your own research on her. And we're going to announce who she is in the next few days. She is currently the CEO of the largest yoga-based retreat center in North America. She was the former president and CEO of a really highly regarded liberal-minded liberal arts college called Goddard College in Vermont. And she's been a psychologist for almost 30 years, focusing on all kinds of subjects around transformation. How do we transform as humans? So you'll hear in the next few days. We're just teasing you in terms of not giving your name. She's coming 2 weeks from tonight. She will be here on our next happy hour on Thursday, June 4th. If anybody has comments on this evening's happy hour experience, please email them to partners@AGEIST. Now that's AGEI.ST. This is about adding value to our audience. So candid feedback is brilliant. Tell us what we are not getting right, what we can improve on. Give us some suggestions of some great guests in the future, as good as Paul. If you enjoyed tonight's happy hour, that means we would love to have you donate to Paul's charity of choice, which is the American Red Cross. For someone who's so unorthodox, I was really surprised to see this, and I love it, but because the Red Cross does so much good work. He is the former board chair of the Red Cross in Santa Monica, and you have the option to donate to where your support is needed, whether it's your local Red Cross or a specific need like the coronavirus outbreak. Although,
I just want to say this is my brother Joel here.
Joel!
Who did the effects for the Matrix and won an Oscar for What Dreams May Come. A little brother can talk up his big brother, baby.
Wow. Thank you for joining. Do you have the cone?
Yeah.
The cone, not the cone of silence. Okay, the cone of cat. Yes, there we go. You are an alien. Laura's going to put the link in the chat box. Thank you. It will direct you to the donate page. David, what a night. What an hour.
Full disclosure, Paul is my CFO. I have a tripping alien hound CFO. So what else do you need to know about AGEIST?